she's standing in front of him. He's got her by the arms, and dog comes in and just nails her down at the calf, rips it off. The Valentine's Day Massacre. So I know it's a weird thing to name it that, but Valentine's Day, I was supposed to work that night, so was my wife, so we had gotten married in between all of this going on, right? So I was supposed to work, she was supposed to work. We went to a Valentine's Day lunch, right? So again, we had been looking for a guy, the police department had been looking for a guy that had been implemented in the killing of another gang member from the opposing team, I guess, right? So they had contacted this guy multiple times before that day, and every time they got close to him, he either got away or he drove away, and the guy knew how to drive because they got into 3 pursuits with a guy where he actually got away. And that was really hard to do for our department because we chased everybody. One of the things that the chief made clear for that department at that time is, you can run from us, but you're not going to get away. We're going to get you. So he had gotten away 3 times and was bragging about it, right? And every time they got close to him by either walking up on him or looking for him somewhere in the house, he had gotten away. Well, this one day, Valentine's Day, it was a weekday, our high school SRO is driving on the street behind the high school. And it's kind of that opposing car thing that you kind of see in the movies sometime, where he's driving in a patrol car and the car's coming towards him and he sees the 2 faces, 2 male faces, but he knows there's 3 people in the car, and the backseat passenger ends up being a female. He looks over, the passenger looks over, they make eye contact, and he'd been actively one of the coppers that was looking for this guy because he wanted him bad because he got away from him the last time, right? So they make eye contact and they take off, gone, right? He flips a U-turn and the pursuit's on. Chases him for a short period of time. And I think it was within a 5 square block area, the guy kept driving in kind of a circle, but game's on, right? And he's not letting this guy get away. Well, he ends up running into a curb and flattens both of his front tires. Leg bail, right? Leg bail meaning they all jump out of the car and take off, all 3 of them. They run down the street, and it happens to be the same street that they did the drive-by. They run into a house. Really small ranch-style house on a rectangular property with a 1-car garage as you're looking at the front of the house to the right, but it's separate from the house. There's no door that goes from the house into the garage. He's on the radio screaming, "I need units, I've got this guy, we've been looking for him, everybody knows that we're looking for him." Everybody comes in. Even command staff was coming out of the police department to go over there to help, including the chief, right? So back in those days, pagers, right? Pagers were popular, and obviously by then we had cell phones. So my pager goes off, and I was about at that point in my career where I was going to take that pager and smash it because it wasn't doing me any good. My phone rings, and it's dispatch calling. "Hey, we got a guy that ran. It's this guy. You know who we're talking about?" "Yeah, where are you? Can you come out?" I go, "I'm just south of the police department having lunch with Leslie. I'm going to go to the house, change. Give me 20 minutes at the most." We get up out of the booth. We talk. I remember Leslie telling the waitress, hey, I can't pay for it now. We're going to be back. Here's who we are. And they go, okay, no problem, right? We jam back to the house. I kind of had myself set up to where I had kind of that chair that you have in your bedroom where you can just get up out of bed and jump into your uniform and go, right? So I left my jeans on, and by then I wasn't wearing like the typical police officer uniform anymore. I had gotten myself to where I got rid of all of my bat belt stuff here, and I got myself a tactical vest, and I put my handcuffs, my radio, my leash, everything, extra magazines and everything were on top, right? And I could just take that vest and slap it on, zip it up, and I'm gone, right? Threw my bulletproof vest on first. I remember I had a t-shirt on. The flaps that are at the bottom of your vest that you tuck in were both hanging out front and back, right? Tail coat, front coat. Put my vest on. I go to the dog run, grab the dog. He already knows what's going on because I'm hauling ass. He knows that I got my uniform on. We're going to play, right? So I jump in the car, end up going code 3, lights and sirens, through town. High school's located about in the middle of town. And when I get there, they had already set up the perimeter, locked down the school. The chief and the commander were standing on the outside perimeter when I got there. And the officer, the SRO, was standing with them, talking to them, kind of giving them the story of what happened and what we're going to do. And I go back to thinking this is going to be another SWAT thing, right? At least I had now a tactical vest. I still didn't have a ballistic helmet, but we're progressing. So I walk up there, got the dog with me. Chief looks at me and goes, "You good?" "Perfect." He goes, "Go for it." Best thing the guy ever said to me ever, right? Commander didn't say anything. He was another one of those go-getters. I look at the SRO and I go, "What do you have?" He goes through the whole thing. I chased him here, chased him there. They ran up the curb, 2 flat tires, all 3 of them leg bailed. I ran after him, but I know that he carries a gun. And they went into this house. "You're sure? Positive?" "Yes." I saw them go in the house. I didn't see anybody coming out the back. We got a perimeter on the back. They haven't seen anybody else come out. What do you want to do? Okay, who's on SWAT right now that I can use? And SWATers were already coming in, but they hadn't been there yet. So we kind of dragged it out a little bit to give the SWAT guys a little bit of a chance to get there, because I needed that same group of people that I had on that initial bite for my dog, because I knew they knew what we were going to do, right? So I had 2 of those guys that were working day shift right there with me, and they had all of their gear and equipment in the trunk of their car. They got suited up. By the time they did that, 3 other guys showed up, so that was 5 plus myself, 6 of us. We came up with a plan. Front door of the house is open. The house is a square, right? It's just a small house, probably 1,000 square feet, maybe. So I'm looking at it basically as 4 corners, right? And back then we hadn't numbered corners of houses yet. So again, I'm at the head of the stack. I took Mark, was going to be my cover officer, over the top of my left shoulder. He was already good with working with the dog standing next to me where the dog was. Dog's always on your left-hand side. So he's over the top of me. All the other guys are in conjunction, lined up behind me. We come up with a plan, same thing that we did at the other house. We're gonna send them in, let them search. The only difference with this house, it was daytime. And the back door, looking straight through the house, was open. So I thought, okay, what I don't want them to do is just go in, look left and right, and then bolt out the back, because we had perimeter officers on the back, and my dog was an asshole. When he was in drive and I gave him the search command, if you weren't ready for it or knew how to handle yourself, you were gonna get bit, right? And I knew that. So I go, okay, I'm gonna direct him into the house to the left, to the right. We're gonna go in to the left, to the right, and I'm gonna make sure he doesn't bolt out the back door. If we get a chance, let's close that back door if we can. Never got that far. He goes in, I make the announcements like the last time. Santa Maria Police Department, Canine, come out now or I'll send the dog. Nothing. Second announcement, send the dog in. Foran. He goes in, left, right, goes to the left, and then comes back out and wants to go out the back door, and I got him to actually lay down right there at the door, and I said, we need to go in there because he's gonna go out the back, and I don't want that. So we go in, they do a cursory search of 3 corners. I grab onto him, we search the last room, house is empty. Didn't have an attic space, no crawl space, nothing. So I go, where are they? Well, in the end, one guy ended up being able to get over the fence before he could set up the perimeter, because he couldn't see all the way around the house when he ran up and stopped because he knew the guy had a gun. So that guy jumped over the fence, gone, out of play. But nobody else has come out. Where are they, right? So first thing I asked was, does anybody check the garage? No. So in my mind, that's the only place that he can be, if he's anywhere, or he got out of the perimeter again, got away. So we go back out the front, and the garage is separate from the house. It's got an old tilt-up style door and a man door at the very back where you can walk in and out. So again, we come up with a plan, we get in a stack, line up behind each other, I'm at the front. We get to the door where I'm gonna make an announcement, send the dog in, and this garage isn't any bigger than maybe a car and a third. It's real narrow. So the door, as you're looking at it, I'm kneeling down right here with my dog. The door swings in, and the wall is right there to the back of the garage. So I crack the door, I push it open, and what I didn't pick up on immediately is that my dog did that quick head turn to the crack of the door, but it didn't register in my mind because I wasn't thinking about that at all. I made an announcement, Santa Maria Police Department, come out or I'll send in the dog. Not even a wait time, gone, foran. Dog goes in, and as he goes past the door, immediately his head turns, but he keeps going straight. And because he was so high in drive, he used to do that notoriously. He would pick up the scent but wouldn't try to compute it in his head, and he would just go out as far as he could and then come back and search it systematically. So he goes in, turns his head, keeps going, there's a car in there. Goes down the driver's side of the car, and I can hear him messing around with something or trying to get through something at the front left corner of the car, but he comes back. And as he comes back around at the trunk, I'm thinking, okay, now I've got to get him down the passenger side because we haven't searched this yet. Here's what he does. He stops at the trunk and he's looking at me. So if I'm the dog and you're me, he's looking at me and he does this. He turns his head. Immediately behind the door, screaming like a bitch, right? And it's a female, right? And so we found out later that the third person in the car was asshole's girlfriend, okay? So she's screaming. The only thing I think of is that she's screaming because the dog's biting him. No, that's not what. He actually used her as a human shield and pushed her out from behind the door so that the dog could bite her instead of him. What a man, huh? So she's standing in front of him. He's got her by the arms, and the dog comes in and just nails her down at the calf, rips it off. Not completely, but it's chunked, right? And she's screaming like crazy. He starts pushing her forward. We come barreling in. The garage door opens up. Everybody else comes barreling in because they hear the fight's on now. So I go in because I'm thinking, shit, he's got her. He doesn't have him. I got to get him off of her and maybe get him. This is all going on within like seconds of each other. It's happening like real quick. But you, as well as I know, that when stuff like that goes down, it's like that slow, right? It's like really slow, like when is it gonna end type of thing. So by the time I got Aiko off of her leg, they had already gotten into a fight with a guy behind the door, and the other guys were jumping over the top of the car, beat the shit out of him, right? And took him into custody. She ended up having to have reconstructive surgery on her leg to get her calf reattached. And so it became the Valentine's Day Massacre.
And he was wanted for what again?
Murder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So ultimately there's an incident on a track, right, that leads to your career-ending injury. Would you call it a track?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that. Or tell us about it.
My dog, by this point, had 16 bites under his belt. Like I said in the beginning, he was averaging a bite about every 4 months. And we'd done everything from yard searches where he got a guy that was burglarizing cars that were being worked on at a repair facility, to searching for domestic violence suspects right outside of the house where it occurred, and the coppers had already searched everywhere, they said. And I got there with a dog and he found him 100 yards away, and the guy was laying in a ditch, footing ditch that was being dug for the next house over. So we'd gone through all of that kind of stuff. Everybody loved the dog, called me out all the time. I was on cloud 9, right? I was at the top of my game. I'm working one night and we had a guy that leg bailed from a copper that knew who he was, and he was going, he ran from him, turned into a bunch of houses and was going yard to yard. And I was already at work. So I hear the call going out, I hear him screaming, I go over there, we start doing yard to yard searches. And this is at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. So I go over there, and I always started where he last saw the guy, right? And we could actually, when I got there, again, it was happening so quickly, you could actually hear like somebody's going over fences or through them because boards are breaking and that kind of thing. So I go, let's go in the back here and we're just going to follow him and we'll head him, we'll get him somewhere along the line. So we go in to the backyard. The next yard was a short chain link fence. Get over the top of that, dog jumps over it. We go through the next yard and the next fence was a boarded fence. There was one board that was kicked out, but I didn't put two and two together. So for me, with the dog, everything is about speed when you're doing yard-to-yard searches because the guy can get into almost anything, anywhere along that line, right? Or he can get away if you don't have a perimeter set up anywhere. So I go up to the fence and I kick out two more boards next to the broken board, and now when I think about it, it was stupid of me to, because the dog went through, I want to be where the dog is, because if there's somebody in the backyard that lives in that house, they're going to get nailed, right? Typically you would send somebody to that house and tell them stay in the house, we're doing a search with the dog. Didn't have time because it's actively going on. Well, dog goes through the fence first, I go through, and I didn't realize that there was a drop off at the bottom of the fence. So as I stepped through with my right leg trying to go forward, and my boot got caught in the ditch, and it just completely took the top half of my leg and the bottom half of my leg in the opposite direction, and I was down. It took everything that I had to just be able to get back up to my feet. The guy ended up getting away. We never ended up getting him because of that whole incident. But the dog couldn't get any further because that house had boarded fence all the way around, so it was closed in. So he couldn't get anywhere, and I was able to call him back because you know that moment when you go, oh shit, this is really bad. And you can kind of feel like the blood dropping out of you. And I don't know if you've ever had that feeling, but that's the feeling that I got because it hurt like hell. It was bad. I literally had to have two guys carry me back to my car so that I could put the dog in there. And what I ended up doing is I ended up tearing everything in my knee joint to the point where lights out.
So you go, I'm assuming you go to the emergency room that night, you probably go
They put me in a straight leg splint.
Okay.
And the emergency room doctor at that point looked at it and he goes, I can't do anything for you. We're going to have to send you to a specialist tomorrow. So end up going to the specialist. They go through the whole thing, MRI and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, there's nothing left. You're going to have a knee replacement. And if you want to pull the rug out from under somebody, when that kind of shit happens to you, it was bad. It's the worst thing, the worst day of my fucking life.
Because again, in your mind, you're at the top of your game.
Right.
Right? You have everything that you wanted in law enforcement. You're doing what you love.
Not only did I have that, but I had also gotten myself to become a canine trainer. I went back to the canine academy that I graduated from and spent another 10 weeks there to become a canine trainer, to be able to train other police departments around the Santa Maria Police Department, because the chief's big ambition was to get other police departments to come to us for training. And the canine program at that time was the first program that was bringing in police agencies from other cities to come and train with us. So I was doing that on top of getting us a second dog.
So your choices were knee replacement
right?
or just get it cleaned up and see what happens?
That wasn't
or?
a possibility.
No.
It wasn't a possibility. There was no cleaning it up and hope, put a ace bandage on it and yeah, you're good to go. The doctor literally looked at me when I went to go talk to him about the MRI results, and he goes, I even went and got another opinion from somebody else, and I got the same reaction. The way they determine whether you can go back to doing duty or not is by percentage. So I was deemed 86% incapable of going back to work. So basically the only thing I had the ability to do was to walk, and eventually I was going to be on a cane. So there was no way that I was going to be going back. It's not like, so what I would get from people is, well, why can't you do a job inside the police department? Why can't you be a detective? And after going through my cycle of depression and anger and frustration, when people would ask me that, I would tell them, because most people don't know how the hierarchy works in the police department, is if you can't push a black and white around, you can't be a detective. Because the propensity of you getting into a foot pursuit or getting into a fight with somebody are just about as great as if you're working down here as a ground pounder, right? So that was never going to be an option for me.
So from the date of your injury to ultimately being faced with the fact that you're going to have to leave law enforcement and actually leaving, how long is that? Is it a year?
So I got injured in 2007 and immediately was off the books. So along with that comes with, what do we do with this dog, right? So my dog had already, he was 16 months when I got him and had already been with me for 6, almost 7 years. And the way it works in the canine world is that a dog that's over 5 years old or has been with a handler longer than 5 years, the ability for that dog to relearn the job with another handler are very slim. And I actually had some dogs like that when I was doing training. Later on, after my police career abruptly ended, where they wanted to retrain a dog with a new handler, and I went to them and told them, this isn't going to work, because the dog's so used to being with that other person that it will take you longer to get that dog to learn to work with a new guy than it would for you to get just a new dog. So having that in mind, they ended up retiring the dog, because I also explained to them that my dog is an asshole and he wasn't going to work with anybody else, which helped me actually later on, because I knew that if I could work that damn Czech Shepherd with his attitude, I could work any dog or train any dog anywhere, which helped me later on. So they ended up retiring the dog, and I ended up, so the way it works in police departments, when they retire a dog, they will give the handler the option of taking the dog, and they'll sell the dog to the handler for $1. So, and this is where my lieutenant, Mike Cordero, became a big part of what was going on with me. He actually pulled a lot of strings and did a lot of talking and negotiating in getting that done for me. because just like the bottom dropped out of me, the bottom dropped out of him, because we had it all. Everybody was enjoying the dog. We were getting stuff done. We were just doing all kinds of stuff, and all of a sudden, done. So at the very most, what I could possibly do is stand on the sideline and be a trainer for the other dog that we had at the time. So the city agreed, police department agreed, the chief agreed. They sold me the dog for $1. And what you have to keep in mind, the way it works in police work, is a lot of officers get injured on duty. And what happens is, unfortunately, lawyers have to get involved in this, because what I learned in my case is that it doesn't matter where you work, and it doesn't matter what you do or what relationships you have with your peers or even the command staff. In the end, you're just a fucking number. And you're at the disposal of whatever police department or sheriff's agency you work for, because now you've become a burden to them, because the money that they're spending on you, they could be spending on a newer officer for less money. So they try to brush you aside as fast as they can. So the only saving grace about any of that, as shitty as it is the fact that you get a year of $48.50 pay, is what we called it out there. I'm not sure what they call it anywhere else. I can only tell you from my own experience, once I was deemed injured and not able to go back to work, I got $48.50 pay, which is tax-free pay at my pay rate for an entire year, which is why I didn't retire until March of 2008, because I got injured in February of 2007. So, and in between that year is where you have the arguing and the negotiating between my attorney and the city attorney and the police department and all of that, and you become a forgotten soul. You just get forgotten. The separation part of having to leave something like that behind is the shittiest part. It's the shittiest part you could ever do as a cop. Because there's people that go out on injury, what I call like the hangnail and the broken fingernail, or oh, my back hurts type of thing. And let's face it, when you go into any kind of a job where you're hands-on, whether it be construction, truck driver, anything that you have to use your body for, you're going to have injuries, right? There's just certain stuff that comes along with whatever job you do, and you just deal with it and go on. The guys that I talk to nowadays, that when we get on the topic of what happened to me or what happened to this guy or that guy, every guy that watches this will have a story of, oh yeah, you know what, when I bent over the wrong way, oh, my back, it went out, but I kept working, right? So the propensity for those, what I call lame injuries, where somebody really doesn't want to do the job anymore because they're either not good at it or they just don't want to do it anymore. They want to go out on that medical because it's tax-free money for the rest of your life. But what it does is it makes the guys that actually get hurt at the top of their game to a point where they can't come back look really bad too. And that's where nobody knows the difference. Because what happened to me is when I got injured, we had a couple of officers that were going out or had gone out on medical retirements for lame things. And you get labeled as, oh yeah, he's just going out on a medical because he doesn't want to work anymore. And that's what I got labeled at because of all those other ones, right? And you lose a lot of ties with people that you had before and it's instant. I mean, it's kind of like when I walked out the door at Santa Barbara PD with, here's my keys, here's my badge, and let me get the door for you. And not even a handshake. That's how it works. And that's the worst part of all of this.
Two-part question, same topic. The emotional impact on you, not just then, but still today. And what was the impact that had on your family? Because they can't help but feel this, right? Because
Correct.
you're losing something, so I'm sure
Right.
you're behaving differently, and you know. So just how does it all impact your world, then and today?
The only word that I can come up with at that time, what I was going through, it's a shit show. It's a shit show because nobody calls you. And I think any person that's been in law enforcement that goes out of it, whether it be on good terms after a long career and retirement, or you go out on an injury because you can't go back, the first 6 months are really bitching because, hey man, I don't have to go to work. I don't have to be tied to the radio. I don't have to listen to that dumbass over here telling me this, that, and the other, and call me an idiot or yell profanities at me or anything like that. But after that, and it happened to me, where 6 months after it was all over, and I finally got it through my head that the chip was gone off of my shoulder, I kind of sat down and I went, the hell am I going to do now? Is the first thing that went through my head. And I still do it to this day. You get that feeling of non-purpose. There's some days where I feel like I'm just kind of floating around out there, where I feel like I have no purpose and I'm not accomplishing anything because everything that I was doing or wanted to do and the things that I wanted to do or continue to do just stopped, came to a dead stop. So luckily for me, I pulled myself together. I hit the bottle bad after I went through all of that, my retirement and after that 6 months of it. From a personal standpoint, my wife, Leslie, she understood a lot of it because we both worked in the same field, her a dispatcher, and she was a lot of times on the other end of the radio when I was screaming for help. So she had a pretty good idea, but it's not the same, if you know what I mean. It's not the same because from a standpoint of her being the savior of all the cops that she's taken care of when she's working in dispatch to me, the ground pounder, and the other ground pounders running around doing all of the things that we do, there's a big difference, right? And when you don't have that, there's no support mechanism for when that happens to somebody. Because what happened to me when I separated from Santa Maria Police Department was the same thing that happened to me at Santa Barbara, because I had already been gone for a year. And life goes on. Police work doesn't stop, right? The police department continues to grow, continues to evolve into different things, and people forget. And that's the bad part. People forget. You feel like you're forgotten.
So I know this is seems to me would be an obvious answer to this question, but do you miss the job?
Hell yes.
And what do you miss about the job?
The camaraderie of being with other people, that guys and gals that think the same way, that have the same complaints and the same highs and lows that you have. Because the one thing that I've learned in the years since then is that cops hang out with cops. We all think alike. We all have stories to tell. And it's hard for us, I think, for myself anyways, to tell these stories to people that aren't within that arena to make sense. It all sounds really bitchin' and it sounds like a movie, but like I had talked about before, they're all learning curves, because all of these incidents that I've talked to you about, when you go back and you look at them months or even weeks, months, years later, and you relive those incidents in your head, there's 100 things that I would have done differently had I had the knowledge that I didn't have when it was occurring. But we don't think like that, because if you're a cop, the first thing we think of, I'm getting the bad guy, right? That's my main objective, is to go out and get the bad guy. It's not about the money. Mm-hmm. It's not about any of that. It's about going out and hunting the man, which is what I enjoyed when I worked the dog.
So do you have any advice? This is what I ask. For somebody that's looking at being a cop, for someone who's maybe at that 10-year mark and, you know, maybe having a rough time on the job, and then somebody who's looking at retiring.
The one thing that I will tell you is that the job can be a pain in the ass. We all know that. It can either beat you down, or I should say, it can beat you down, or it can build you up. And my biggest advice to anybody that is at that point or has even been at that point is to don't take anything for granted. Don't go and think that you're invincible, because as I still do to this day, shit happens, and you better have a plan.
Will, thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.